After my divorce, 8 years have passed between my daughter and me. She blocked me and refused to listen to my side. However, she recently contacted me, intending to receive her inheritance. When I turned 54, I divorced my wife, who was 48. At that time, my daughter was already an adult woman at the age of 28. She stopped all contact immediately, choosing her mother's side, showing no interest in my feelings. My divorce happened almost 10 years ago, and it took me a long time to accept it. I went out and accepted my new life. My ex-wife tried to completely destroy my reputation, but mostly because I genuinely loved my daughter and was completely cut off from her life. It was much more difficult than it might seem, because she was already an adult. I didn't have the opportunity to be with her unless she wanted to, and she made her choice, completely ignoring my point of view. Many years have passed, and I have had time to adjust to new circumstances, focusing on taking care of my mother, who suffers from Alzheimer's disease, and my career. There was a temporary relationship, but after the divorce, I couldn't completely trust another person. My life has been like this for almost 10 years. And my daughter contacted me recently. After such a long time, I felt a certain joy and thought that she had finally come to her senses and realized that the divorce was due not only to my actions. It was comforting, especially after my mom died, and I was dealing with my grief alone. My daughter came to me a few months after my grandmother's death. She called from an unknown number, and I recognized her voice, which had changed over the years. I was completely shocked by this call. She said that she found out about my grandmother's death through Facebook and decided to check how they treat me. My heart sank when I found out that she was following my life on the internet, but it was nice of her. I thanked her for the call and assured her that I was fine. I've always missed her. We spent a lot of time talking, and she said she wanted to meet me in person, not just by phone. I immediately agreed, and we agreed to meet at my house on the weekend. I was excited to meet her after all these years, which is why I wrote this post to share my excitement with anyone who can read it. Hopefully we can rebuild our relationship or at least start over and close the gap in our acquaintance. I wanted to cook dinner for her, as she always loved my dishes. I was nervous and excited when I opened the door and saw her. After all these years, she has changed so much that I didn't even recognize her right away. We talked, and although it was awkward at first, we were able to open up to each other. She talked about her life and work, and I shared my feelings after the divorce. We finally dared to discuss the past and the problems that have arisen. She apologized for never listening to my version of events, choosing her mother's side, and said that her mother had distorted my reputation. Fortunately, she now regrets her actions and admits her mistakes. Before she was too young to understand, and she had to be manipulated. We continued talking and everything was going well until she finally told me why she decided to come to me after all these years. She looked nervous, and then she said what she could have been thinking about all these years: she wanted to be with me. It was a moment of happiness for both of us. She said that she had actually been following my actions through Facebook and, when she found out about her grandmother's death, she believed that lawyers would establish contact with her regarding the inheritance. However, when no one did, she decided to contact me personally. She said she would like to give me some time and space to grieve, but she recently got engaged and the money would be very useful to me to help organize the wedding celebration. This feeling was like a slap in the face. To be honest, I thought that after all these years my prayers had been answered and I would be able to rebuild my family, but it turns out that she never took care of me in the first place, and all these actions were just a way to achieve inheritance. The funniest thing about all this is that even she is not the rightful heir. And if she were not such a disgusting daughter, in my opinion, would certainly bequeath her share, if not all. I've never been interested in money, to be honest. I live in my own house and don't have any expensive hobbies, mostly buying clothes with a purpose. Even if the inheritance wasn't an issue in the first place, I wouldn't mind helping her with the wedding. If she had just reached out to me instead of trying to take advantage of my condition, I would have been ready to support her. I'm only worried about the inheritance. All this was spinning in my head, but at the same time, I somehow kept my calm and asked her what she really wanted. She took a very defensive position and said that the inheritance was only secondary, and her real goal was to contact me, and she would never forgive herself if she did not achieve her goal. When her grandmother was alive, she said that she would like to help all these years, but never found the courage to do so because she thought that I would never forgive her for throwing me out without explanation and that she was also controlled by her mother. I could see it in her scared expression. It said that she was just trying to smooth things over so that I could forgive her. And I wondered if she was sincere, or if it was all about money from the very beginning. I asked her how she knew about the inheritance, and she told me that a couple of years ago she was visiting my deceased mother, who informed her of her desire to leave her everything that was left of my father, who died many years ago, since she was his only granddaughter in the family. I don't have any siblings, and my marriage was strong at that point, so I understand why my mother might have informed my daughter about this. I mean, if the divorce hadn't happened or my daughter hadn't stopped communicating with me for years after the divorce, the money would have been for her, as I mentioned. But the idea that she only cared about money and that she was giving me false hopes just destroyed me. I was left devastated, but I did my best not to show her my feelings. I realized that the only way to test my daughter's sincerity would be to tell her that there is no money for inheritance and see how she reacts. I asked her how much she expected from the inheritance, and she assumed quite a decent amount, but I told her that it was all planned and I was very sorry to disappoint her, but her grandmother actually left everything to me many years ago and I'm going to use this money to start your business. That's why I can't help her. I offered to help arrange her wedding using my own funds, offering several thousand for wedding expenses. The look of disappointment on her face confirmed my worst fears. She said she appreciated my offer, but since she is the only grandson who deserves at least part of the inheritance, since it is her grandmother's money, she will not be able to accept my help. I also told her that I would like to help her, but my decision is final and there was nothing more I could do for her if she was not satisfied with the money I offered. Her face turned completely red and she became visibly angry. She told me to reconsider my decision again, but I repeated that I would remain true to my principles. It was then that she revealed her true identity and said something that only confirmed all my doubts about her true intentions. She told me that she should have known that I would always be selfish and her mom was sure that I would be alone in life. I looked at her with barely concealed disgust. Her words were hurtful, but at the same time I expected this turn of events. I just laughed in response. I went up to her and told her straight to her face that if she hadn't blocked me years ago, she would have received my message about her grandmother and probably received most, if not all, of the inheritance. My goal was to cause her complete confusion and ask her a question about what I mean. I suggested that she unlock me on her old number so that I could forward her all the messages she might never receive. And she did it. I forwarded all the messages in which I begged her to listen to me and even informed her about her grandmother's Alzheimer's diagnosis. We wanted them to meet before she forgot about her. Only the grandson wanted it. And all this was true, as in the very beginning, my mother often talked about her illness about my daughter and asked to see her. I remember how it broke my heart that I couldn't fulfill this wish. And now, this ungrateful, cruel child has the audacity to ask for an inheritance. To my daughter's credit, I admit that she felt ashamed after reading all those messages to which she apologized to me. But she said that as soon as she read all these messages, it became clear that her grandmother wanted her to receive her share of the inheritance, and it was unfair of me to punish her. She said she was young and didn't know any better at the time of the divorce, otherwise she would have acted differently. She also told me that she sincerely wants to rebuild our relationship, and if I choose to be selfish, now she won't feel comfortable continuing our relationship. I told her that if money is what makes or breaks it for her, then maybe it's better if we don't have a relationship at all. I wanted to believe her when she was talking all this nonsense about restoring our relationship. I really had hope, but at one point I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I told her that I would think about giving our relationship another chance. But the issue of inheritance became closed and she looked at me with pure hatred and left the house. I didn't try to stop her and haven't talked to her since. I talked to some of my friends, most of whom agreed with me that I had done the right thing. But one of my close friends said that since money is not important to me, I should just forget about it and let my daughter take at least something from the inheritance, if that's what mattered to her. It could mean that I should have a family in my life, but I don't have one. I agree with that, but since he said it, I can't get it out of my head. I have to give my daughter part of my inheritance. Hi, this is new information about the inheritance. Please leave comments to share your opinion and offer your point of view. Thank you so much for the advice and opinions that gave me a new perspective. I need to start by answering the most frequently asked question about what happened during my divorce. I haven't talked about this for many years, but I think now is the time for it. So my wife and I got married 23 years ago, and who would have thought, after all these years, she could betray me. I really didn't want to go into details, but I found out that she had been cheating on me with several men for quite some time. When I finally found out the truth, it was a huge shock to me. I didn't know how to resist her, so I started abusing alcohol and abandoned myself. Almost ruined my life. I often quarreled with her, and she used it against me to manipulate my daughter and get her on her side. After almost a year of living in this state, we finally broke up. My ex-wife was a journalist, and she used her influence to try to destroy my reputation. After the divorce, it took me a long time to drink and get back to my normal life. As I mentioned, my daughter has completely abandoned me. I admit it. When I found out about my ex-wife's affairs, I kind of got distracted from everything related to raising my daughter. Even after the divorce and for a year or so after that, I was almost always an absent father and was not around my daughter. But one day I stopped drinking and started rebuilding my life. First of all, I had to go to her and apologize. But she refused to listen to me and blocked me everywhere. I thought I'd give her time, that she'd come to her senses. But it's been 8 years, and our relationship is only getting worse. So, another big question about my mom's inheritance. Technically, the money was inherited from my father, my grandfather and grandmother. They were both doctors and acquired properties all over the city during their careers. Most of the property was rented out, which brought my father a lot of money. He passed away when I was 21 and left everything to my mom. All this remained in her name as real estate. During my marriage and for several years after the divorce, as long as Mom was alive, everything remained in her name. After my mother's death, I completely rewritten all the buildings received in my name. My wife was left without any property claims in the divorce, except for alimony. However, a few years ago I remarried, as my mother owned everything back then. Everything is fine with us, my daughter is not even close to taking over everything she knows. Of course, her grandmother was a landowner, and I have several assets, but I have never touched this money. The money earned from my previous business was more than enough for a quiet life. I hope that I have also answered all the questions. My daughter didn't even contact me after that night, and I doubt she will. It was just a legacy show, and now that it's gone, I don't expect to see her around anymore. To be honest, I'm not too upset about this, but I know that you shouldn't expect too much from people, regardless of their previous connections. That's what I think. Thank you all for your support, I appreciate it. Maybe it's time to put all this behind me and maybe start dating again and look for a new company instead of waiting for ghosts from my past. It's been a whole week since the last update, and I thought this would be the last one. But it seems that everything in life is not going as planned. Anyway, I had just returned from work and was thinking about meeting a couple of friends when someone rang the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I opened the door anyway. And there, as in a nightmare, she stood. She changed her hairstyle and lost some weight, which took a couple of seconds for me to recognize her. But it's very hard to forget someone you've been with for decades. To see her was a real shock, to put it mildly. I didn't know what to say, I just stood there. Then she awkwardly asked if I had time to talk about some things. I was hesitant, but I didn't want her standing on the doorstep, so I just invited her inside. It was very awkward, but imagine that we talked about all this. She said she realized it was a little weird, but there were some things she felt she had to tell me. I asked her to continue, and she said that our daughter had reached out to her and told her about the inheritance. I think I foresaw that this would happen. Why she needed to tell me about it after all these years, I do not know. In any case, she said that she realized that the divorce was solely my fault, and that she went much further than she needed to try to get an inheritance. I just laughed about it, but she ignored my reaction. Then she said that I shouldn't punish my daughter for what happened between us. She said the same thing as my daughter, that she was very young at the time of the divorce and how I couldn't blame her for choosing her mother over me. I interrupted her at that moment and told her that I had no grudge against anyone else, and even if I held some negative feeling, it would not be directed at her daughter. I told her that I was offended to realize that after all these years, she was only thinking about contacting her father because there was an opportunity to get some money. I told her the same thing I told my daughter, that if she had had the decency to try to reconnect earlier, she would have done it just for the sake of the inheritance. As a result, she received my ex-wife's inheritance. She tried to give some kind of explanation, but I told her that my decision was final. And if they're going to just walk around and talk about it, then they're wasting their time. I said that I had plans, and if they had nothing else to discuss, then she should probably leave. She nodded and apologized for bothering me, even though I was uncomfortable. I told her it wasn't necessary, and she left. After she left, I just sat there and couldn't believe my eyes. I never expected to see her again. Talking alone at my house was strange and brought up a lot of old memories that I would rather forget about. I was thinking about meeting my friends and trying to forget about it all. That's right, yes, it happened, and I needed to share it with all of you. I was at work this afternoon when my daughter called me. I thought about not picking up the phone, but out of curiosity I took her call. And she immediately said that if it was related to the inheritance, then she really didn't think we should talk about it. It turned out that she had something else she wanted to talk about and asked me to meet her. She said she had been thinking about what had happened for a long time and felt she owed me an apology. She understands that I have every reason to be disappointed, but if I am willing to forgive and give our relationship another chance, then she would be happy to see me at her wedding. I was left very puzzled. Well, whatever happens, I have to look around and make a decision. But I'll talk about this in the next update.